Welcome to the Experience Lady channel. Enjoy watching. I never thought opening the door to a helpful neighbor would lead to the most confusing and shameful week of my life. But here I am sitting in my kitchen, staring at the same spot where everything began, questioning everything I thought I knew about myself, about marriage, about loyalty. It was supposed to be harmless, just a neighbor being kind while my husband Jack was away for work again. But you know that feeling when something seems too easy, too natural, too good to be true. Yeah, that's exactly how it started. You ever get so used to being invisible that the first person who truly sees you feels like a breath of air after being underwater for too long? That's what he felt like. Henry. I didn't plan for any of it. I didn't dress up, I didn't flirt. I didn't think twice when I asked him for help with the sink. But sometimes all it takes is one spark in a room that's been dry for far too long. And when that spark hit, everything I'd been trying to suppress came rushing out like a dam breaking. I wish I could tell you I stopped it right there. I wish I could say I remembered my vows. I wish I could go back to the version of myself before that knock on the door. But I can't, because once you cross a line like that, there's no going back to who you were before. And if my husband Jack ever finds out, I don't know what I'll do or who I'll be. Maybe the worst part isn't what I did. It's that a part of me didn't want to stop. So if you're still here, if you've ever felt invisible in your own marriage or longed for someone to really see you again, then you might understand why what happened. You might not forgive me, but maybe you'll understand. Before I dive into this story, please take a moment to subscribe to Shocking Infidelity Saga, where real stories peel back the curtain on what really happens behind closed doors. And if anything I say hits close to home, or if you just need to let something off your C*******T like this video and leave a comment, your thoughts might help someone else out there who feels just as alone as I did. Alright, deep breath. Here's how it all began. From the outside, everything looked fine. We live in one of those quiet suburban neighborhoods, neatly trimmed hedges, kids riding scooters after school, couples waving as they walk their dogs. You'd think nothing ever goes wrong here, but the truth is, behind every closed door, there's something no one talks about, and behind mine there was a silence growing louder every day. I'm 37. I've been married for 10 years. I used to think that was an accomplishment, 10 years of loyalty, of building a life, raising a family. But somewhere along the way, that life started feeling more like a routine I couldn't get out of, and loyalty started to feel like loneliness in disguise. I stay home with the kids, I take care of the house. Cook, clean, handle everything. And for the most part, one don't complain. But lately I felt more like a roommate than a wife. We don't fight, we don't scream. We just exist side by side, but miles apart. He travels a lot for work. My husband Jack, he's not a bad man, he works hard, pays the bills. He doesn't cheat, doesn't drink, but he's somewhere else, even when he's here. He kisses me goodbye in the morning, but barely sees me at night. It's like we're living parallel lives, and every time he comes back from a trip, I think maybe he'll look at me differently. Maybe he'll ask how I'm doing or notice something about me, but he never does. I stopped expecting it a long time ago, stopped dressing up, stopped trying to start conversations that go nowhere, stopped asking for attention that always felt like begging. You tell yourself it's just a phase, that you're being dramatic, that this is what marriage looks like after a decade. But the truth is, I felt invisible. And that kind of emptiness doesn't stay quiet forever. Then there's Henry. He moved in across the street about a year ago, early 41, good shape, quiet but friendly. He'd been through a rough divorce. I heard about it from one of the other moms in the neighborhood. He kept to himself mostly, but was always the first to offer a help when someone needed it. Fix the Thompsons' garage door, help the elderly lady next door shovel her driveway. He had that calm, dependable energy, like nothing rattled him, and he always had time for people, which I realize now is rare. I noticed him before I ever spoke to him, not in a romantic way, not at first, just little things. He looked people in the eye. He smiled. When he talked, he listened, not just waited for his turn to speak. That's something you start noticing when you haven't been truly listened to in years. The first time we really talked was when my youngest fell off his bike right in front of Henry's driveway. Henry came running out before I even had time to panic, kneeling down, checking his knee, calming him down while I caught my breath, and after that something shifted. He'd wave when he saw me, make small talk when we were both bringing in groceries, and little by little the conversations got longer. He'd ask about the kids, about the dog, about how I was doing. I wasn't used to someone actually asking how I was doing. It was subtle, so slow that it didn't feel like anything until it suddenly felt like everything. He started coming around more often, always had a reason. He saw the porch light flickering and offered to change the bulb, said the trim on the back gate was starting to loosen and he had just the right tools to fix it. Said he used to do this kind of stuff all the time when he was married. I'd smile and thank him and offer him a cold drink, and he'd stay just long enough for a story, a laugh, something warm and easy. He reminded me of the man my husband Jack used to be. Before life wore him down, before the distance settled in between us like a wall we couldn't see, but always felt I'd find myself watching Henry through the window sometimes when he was working on something outside, not because I was attracted to him, but because he looked like he wanted to be where he was, like he was still connected to the world around him, and that made me realize how long it had been since I felt connected to anyone. There was no tension yet no crosslink, but I felt something stirring in me that I hadn't felt in years, something dangerous, not because of what he was doing, but because of what I was starting to feel and deep down. I think I knew that if I wasn't careful, something was going to shift. Not because I planned it, not because I wanted to betray anyone, but because something in me was waking up and it scared me more than I was willing to admit. It started with the sink, just a leaky pipe under the kitchen, annoying, not urgent. Kind of thing I usually waited for my husband Jack to get around to fixing if he remembered. But he was out of town again, off on another 3-day trip that had somehow stretched to 5. So I grabbed my phone, stared at it for a second, then messaged Henry. "Hey, sorry to bother you, do you know anything about plumbing?" He replied almost instantly. "Sure, want me to swing by after lunch?" I remember standing there reading that message and feeling something flutter in my stomach, not butterflies, not excitement, just anticipation. I told myself it was because I didn't want to deal with it alone, that it was just about the sink. But when I caught myself fixing my hair before he came over, that's when I should have known it was a sunny afternoon. Quiet. Kids were at school. I remember the light pouring in through the kitchen window, hitting the spot on the floor where the water had posed. Henry knocked once, then let himself in like he'd done it 99 times. He smiled warm and easy, said, "Show me the damage." We laughed. Felt like nothing, but it wasn't nothing. Never was. He crouched down and opened the cabinet beneath the sink, inspecting the pipe like he actually enjoyed it. I stood nearby, arms crossed, pretending to tidy the counter. He talked as he worked, told me about his ex-wife's obsession with Pinterest plumbing hacks. I laughed, really laughed for the first time in what felt like months, and he looked up at me grinning and said that laugh. "You should do that more often." I froze because no one says things like that to me anymore, not even my husband Jack, especially not my husband Jack. He kept working. I made coffee, we talked about nothing and everything he remembered. I hate vanilla creamer, remembered my daughter's science project from a conversation we had weeks ago. He listened, he remembered, and that's when it started. Not the affair, not yet, but the crack. A tiny invisible fracture in the wall. I'd belt around myself, and once you hear that first little split, you can't unhurt it. You can't unfeel it. He finished the repair in under 20 minutes, but he stayed longer, sat with me at the table, just drinking coffee like we had all the time in the world, and I let him, not because I was lonely, though I was, not because I needed the company, though I did, but because in that moment it felt good to be seen, to be interesting, to matter. When he finally stood to leave, I followed him to the door. He turned back, gave me that crooked smile and said, "Anytime you need a hand, just holler. I don't mind." Then he added quietly, "It's nice having someone to talk to." I watched him walk down the path, tools in hand, disappearing across the street, and I stood there a long time after the door closed. It was just a leaky pipe, but looking back, that leak started more than just water flowing. It started something I couldn't stop. Why did it feel so good to be noticed? That question started circling my mind like a quiet echo. I couldn't turn off. I catch myself replaying our conversation, his smile, the way he listened, the way he remembered. And I'd feel something warm in my C******T. Then almost immediately, I'd feel the shame creep in right behind it. Was it just the loneliness talking? Or was I searching for something more, something I couldn't admit even to myself? I kept telling myself it was harmless. We were just neighbors, just three adults having normal conversations. Everyone needs a friend, right? Especially when your days slur together and you start forgetting the last time someone asked how you were really doing. I wasn't doing anything wrong right that night after he fixed the sink. I laid in bed next to my husband Jack, staring at the ceiling. He was asleep within minutes, soft snores, completely unaware. I wanted to roll over and tell him about my day. Tell him how the kitchen finally stopped dripping, how I felt like I laughed for the first time in weeks, but I didn't because he wouldn't have asked. He wouldn't have noticed the change in my mood or the extra effort I'd put into dinner that night. He wouldn't have noticed anything. The next morning, Henry texted me, "Hope the sink's still holding up. Let me know if it gives you any more trouble." I smiled without thinking. Then it became a thing. Little check-ins, short messages, funny memes, and I started responding faster than I meant to. We joked about our favorite shows. He told me he couldn't stand people who microwave fish at work. I told him my daughter started pretending to be a teacher and gave the dogged attention. It was all so easy, so innocent until it wasn't. I started looking forward to hearing from him, started checking my phone a little too often, started noticing how quiet the house felt when he didn't message me. I told myself we were just friends, that I could handle this, that boundaries were still intact. But late at night, when I was alone with my thoughts, the truth was harder to ignore because I knew how it felt when his name popped up on my screen. I knew the way my heart jumped, not in panic but in that schoolgirl kind of way I hadn't felt in years, and that wasn't just friendship. Till I kept replying. I kept laughing. I kept choosing his words over my husband Jack's silence. Then, one afternoon, I was wiping down the kitchen counters when his name flashed across my phone again. "Hey, I was gonna check in on you. Mind if I stopped by for a bit?" I froze. He hadn't come over since the sink, since the coffee, since that smile at the door. And no, wow, he wanted to come again just to check, and my fingers hovered over the screen. I stared at those words like they were glowing, like they held a second meaning. I didn't want to admit my heart beat faster, not with fear, with something else. I could have said no. I could have ignored the message. I could have sent something safe, but I didn't. I told myself it was just coffee, that one visit didn't mean anything, but it didn't stop there. After that first afternoon, Henry started coming around more often, not every day, not enough to raise eyebrows, but enough that I started recognizing the pattern, enough that I started anticipating it. One day, the porch light was flickering again. He noticed while walking. His dog texted me that night, "I can swap that bulb for you if you've got to spare." Course I had one. I always had one, but I said yes anyway. He came by the next morning, fixed it in 5 minutes, and stayed for coffee. We sat at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the blinds, talking about how fast this year was flying by. It was the kind of conversation I used to have with my husband Jack when we were still close. The next time it was the front gate latch, then a squeaky door, then the wobbly towel rack in the guest bathroom. There was always something, and with each fix he stayed just a little longer. Coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into sitting on the couch for just one episode of a show we both claimed to love. That one episode would turn into 3, then 3. Felt like something out of a movie, like I was 26 again, like time had rolled back and I was a version of myself I hadn't seen in years, laughing, feeling alive. I didn't even realize how far we'd gone emotionally until the day he told me about his divorce. We were watching an old sitcom, some rerun that had both of us laughing so hard our sides hurt. Then out of nowhere, he turned serious, told me his wife had fallen out of love with him slowly, that it didn't happen overnight, that it was a series of small moments, missed birthdays, quiet dinners, no more goodnight kisses, he said. You don't notice it at first. But then one day you wake up and realize you're strangers. That hit me like a punch to the C asterisk 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 T. 'Cause that's exactly how I felt in my own marriage, like I was living with a stranger, like I had become one. I told him things I hadn't told anyone, that I couldn't remember the last time my husband Jack asked me how I was really doing that. I felt like I was disappearing little by little into the routine of being the wife and the mom that I missed being seen. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice. He just listened, really listened. We started having these late conversations, not planned, just one message that turned into 11, one joke that turned into a memory, one side that turned into something deeper. The boundaries between us started to blur in those small, quiet spaces, and I stopped pretending I didn't feel it. The physical tension built slowly, so slow. I convinced myself it wasn't real, like the day I handed him a plate and our fingers brushed. It wasn't the touch. It was the pause, the way. Neither of us moved for half a second longer than we should have. That second held something. Then there was the night he fixed the screen door. It was late, cool breeze slipping through the house, soft music playing in the background. When he stood up, dusting off his hands, I walked him to the door. He hugged me. It was quick, polite, but his hand rested on the small of my back, a little too long, and my face lingered near his neck, a little too close. It was just a hug, but it stayed with me all night. I couldn't sleep, not from guilt, from longing. The next time he hugged me, I didn't pull away. The night it happened, there was a storm, one of those loud, restless ones that rolls in without warning, wind howling through the trees, rain hammering the windows, thunder shaking the walls. Kind of storm that makes everything feel just a little more alive, just a little more fragile. The power went out around 699 and 29. The whole house fell into darkness in the middle of dinner. Kids were at a sleepover that night and I was alone. I lit a few candles and sat by the window watching the sky flash in intervals, lightning cutting across the clouds like nerves, firing under skin. It was oddly beautiful and strangely quiet, almost too quiet. Then my phone buzzed. "Henry, saw your lights are out." "You okay?" "Me, yeah, just me here." Lost power. "Henry, want company." "I've got a flashlight and a bottle of red I've been saving." I stared at those words. My thumb hovered over the screen. I should have said no, but everything felt so right, so aligned, like we were meant to be in that moment. On that night under that storm. I said yes. Minutes later he was knocking at the door, flashlight in one hand, wine bottle in the other, wearing that same easy smile. We sat at the kitchen table, 3 candles between us, the flickering light dancing across his face. We talked, laughed softly, sipped wine from mismatched glasses. The rain grew louder, the wind pressed against the windows, but inside it was calm, warm. He told me about the first storm he'd watched after his wife left, how this silence in his house had felt unbearable. That night I told him about the last storm we had before. My husband Jack started traveling so much, how he used to sit on the porch and count the seconds between the thunder, and somewhere between his story and mine, the space between us disappeared. It was quiet. There was no music, no build-up, just his eyes looking into mine, soft and steady, just the flicker of a candle, just the sound of our breathing. He leaned forward first, just a little slow enough that I could have stopped him, but I didn't. Our lips touched. It wasn't rough, it wasn't fast. It was quiet, tender, like 3 people trying to fill holes in their hearts. Like 3 people remembering what it feels like to be wanted. His hand touched my cheek, gentle, almost hesitant, and I melted, not into him, into the moment, into the warmth, into the feeling of being seen, touched, held, finally held. One kiss turned into more, and before I even realized we were no longer just sitting across from each other, we were tangled together on the couch, the storm outside raging like it was echoing the one inside me. We crossed the line, a line I never thought I'd even come close to, a line I used to judge other women for crossing, but in that moment there was no shame, no logic, no marriage, no neighbor, just 3 people who had gone too long without being touched, without being needed, without being seen. And when it was over, when the storm had calmed and the candle had burned halfway down, I sat there in the dim light, wrapped in a blanket, his shirt on the floor beside my feet, and I felt it, a wave of guilt crashing into me. Sharp, cold, inescapable. But underneath it, underneath the shame, there was something else, a strange peace, a quiet calm, a feeling I didn't expect because it felt like betrayal. But it also felt like the first time I'd been touched in years. The next morning, everything felt wrong. The light came in too bright, the silence in the house felt different, heavier. I woke up alone on the couch, still wrapped in that blanket, with a dull ache in my T and the scent of him clinging to my skin. Reality didn't creep in, it slammed into me. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape me. Clothes on the floor, wine glasses on the table, candle wax hardened and messy, puddles across the wood. Everything looked untouched, but everything had changed. I checked my phone. One message, Henry, last night meant a lot. I don't regret it. I stared at it for what felt like forever. My stomach flipped, my hands went cold. I didn't reply. I just deleted it. What had I done? Before this story spirals even further, make sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications for more. And when the story ends, don't forget to show your support through likes and comments. How do I look my husband Jack in the eyes after this? How do I pretend nothing happened when my whole body is screaming that everything has? I felt sick, like my skin didn't fit right anymore, like I'd shed something that I couldn't get back that afternoon. My husband Jack called, said his flight had been delayed, that he'd be home late. His voice was tired, distracted the way it always is. He asked if the kids were okay, if I needed anything. I answered automatically, flat, distant, polite. Conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. He never asked how I was, and when I hung up, I realized he still had no idea, not even a gut feeling. That night I scrubbed the wine glasses until my fingers hurt, put everything back. Exactly how it was, vacuumed the living room even though it didn't need it. It was like I was trying to erase evidence from a crime scene, except the crime was inside me. I avoided Henry after that. Didn't wave when I saw him pulling into his driveway. Didn't answer his texts. 3 at first, then none. I couldn't face him, couldn't face what I'd allowed, what we'd done. But he noticed the next time we bumped into each other at the mailbox of all places. He gave me this HAL file, forced tight. Said, been quiet over there. I mumbled something about being busy, about the kids, about anything, and then he looked at me. Eyes narrowed just slightly and said, I told you I could keep secrets, then added like it was an afterthought, but people always slip. Eventually I froze. He said it lightly like a joke, but there was something under it, a warning, a threat, or just his way of saying he didn't like being shut out. I nodded, said something forgettable, and walked back inside with my T tight and my thoughts spiraling. I started living on edge, double-checking my texts, replaying conversations, looking at my husband Jack's face a little too long, trying to see if he knew, but he didn't. He never looked closely enough to know. And maybe that's what hurt most, that I had done. The one thing I swore I never would, that I had betrayed him and he hadn't even noticed. The guilt came in waves. Some nights it was quiet, just a low hum in the back of my mind. As I folded laundry or packed lunches other nights, it wrapped around my T like a vice, squeezing until I couldn't breathe. Sleep became a stranger. I'd lie next to my husband Jack, wide awake, listening to him breathe, wondering how I ended up here, wondering how I let this happen. I tried harder with him after that, cooked his favorite meals, wore the perfume he used to like, laughed at his dry jokes, touched his hand when we passed in the hallway. He noticed, he softened a little, asked once if everything was okay, nothing deep, just a passing comment, half distracted. I said yes, he didn't press. Maybe he felt something had changed. Maybe he didn't want to know. Sometimes not asking is its own kind of answer, but the space between us didn't shrink. If anything, the distance just got quieter, more polite, more practiced. Like we were both pretending not to notice. We were walking through the motions with our eyes closed. Kept asking myself, was I a terrible person or just a lonely one? Did I betray him, or did I finally give in into the emptiness he helped create? Was I a victim of emotional neglect or a selfish wife who wanted more than what she had? Both answers felt true, and neither one made me feel any better. There's this thing I used to believe about love, that if you're faithful, if you're good, if you stay, then you're safe. But now I'm not sure because I stayed. I did everything right and still I found myself in the arms of someone who wasn't mine. Does it count as cheating? If your heart is completely empty? That question haunted me because I didn't do it for thrills. I didn't do it to hurt anyone. I did it because I was starving for something. I couldn't even name until someone else offered it to me. But that doesn't excuse it. Doesn't undo it. Just makes it messy, eh? And then, like some cruel twist of fate, Henry texted again. It had been over a week. I thought maybe he'd given up. Maybe he understood Henry. I know things are weird, but I just need to see you one last time. Please. I stared at the message for a long time, long enough to feel the sting of everything I'd been holding back. I missed the way he looked at me. I missed how easy it was with him. I missed feeling wanted, but I also hated what it all meant now, the risk, the shame, the weight of it. Till my fingers moved almost on their own. I typed out a reply, paused, deleted it, typed it again. Me okay. He said he needed to see me one last time and I agreed. Keep replaying everything, every word, every moment, every choice I made that led me here. And now I need to ask you something honestly. What would you have done in my shoes? Was I just a lonely wife reaching for something that felt like warmth after years in the cold? Or did I betray something sacred, something I'll never get back? I don't know how to answer that myself. Some days I feel like I was drowning and Henry was the first person to throw me a rope. Other days I wonder if I jumped into the water on purpose just to feel something again. Please let me know in the comments, don't hold back. I need to know if I'm alone in this, if anyone else has ever stood on that same edge, unsure whether to step back or fall forward. And if stories like this make you think twice about what goes on behind closed doors, if they stir something deep in you that you didn't even know is there, then please subscribe to Shocking Infidelity Saga because there's so much more to uncover, so many truths. People carry quietly so many stories that never get told out loud. Narrators voice quiet reflection, carrying both regret and wisdom. Loneliness is quiet, but it's dangerous. It doesn't scream. It whispers softly, gently telling you that you deserve more, that it's okay to reach that. It's okay to forget the rules just this once, and sometimes we listen when we shouldn't. This story isn't about excuses, it's about choices, and sometimes those choices change everything, not with an explosion, not with drama, but with a quiet shift that echoes through every part of you. I'll live with what happened that week for the rest of my life, the guilt, the questions, touch of a secret that will never fully go away. But maybe sharing it here helps me start forgiving myself. Just that, don't forget to give it a like if you like what we shared today, as every interaction helps us grow and allows us to continue connecting with you through stories that matter. Thank you for being part of this community.